And here we are with the producer of The Romulan War, which is a Star Trek fan film. Here is Mark Naccarato. Hello, Mark. So tell us, how did you discover Star Trek?
When I was growing up, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Star Trek was a fixture in my grandparents' house. Every Sunday we'd drive to my grandparents' house and have Sunday Italian dinner, and we'd watch the Steelers play. And then after the Steelers game, you would usually see Star Trek or Time Tunnel, and even if you flipped over to the PBS station, you would see The World at War, which was a favorite over there as well, which was a documentary series about World War II. It's interestingly those two things, both Star Trek and those old World War II documentary series, inspired the Romulan War. So that's pretty much it. I grew up watching Star Trek. My uncle especially was a huge Star Trek fan, more so than my dad was. And I just remember my uncle, who had seen it in the first run syndication when he was in college himself. He was the one that would sort of push the television over to Star Trek on Sunday. And of course, a little kid who already liked using his imagination, who liked, spaceships and wacky costumes and cardboard planets and exotic looking women in crazy looking costumes. This was all just amazing for a little kid. And so that's really where initially I got into Star Trek. And then, as I got older, I started figuring out sort of the big themes and deciphering a lot of what they were talking about. And I became just a big fan of Star Trek. That's
interesting. That's the way I saw it too, how you view it one way as a child, and then as you get older, you see more to it. So it's very entertaining for both children and grown-ups.
Absolutely. I guess when I got older, I think I was probably graduating high school or in high school when The Next Generation came out. And then, of course, you started seeing, Next Generation was just a huge phenomenon. That's when they started showing sort of the classic Star Trek episodes again. And then you started being able to rent them on video. It's almost like I had gone back and rewatched a lot of classic Star Trek, and a lot of episodes and stories I had kind of forgotten about and hadn't seen in 15 years or so, or 10 years. And it was almost like I got something new out of it, watching all those a second time, going through with an adult perspective versus, little kid perspective. That's one thing I've always liked about Star Trek is if you can, in fact, on multiple viewings, pick up different things from it. It doesn't just work on a single. And I was a big fan of Star Wars too. Star Wars came out when I guess I would have been about 8 or 9 years old. I actually saw Star Wars while we were on vacation in Southern California. And so I saw it kind of opening weekend in California when it was just this huge phenomenon. And I love Star Wars, but it's a different animal. And even then I knew it was an action adventure versus Star Trek, which was more science fiction and more thoughtful.
Even though Star Wars is great, but Star Trek does owe something to the success of Star Wars. If it wasn't for the first Star Wars movie, we wouldn't have gotten Star Trek the Motion Picture. So tell us, Mark, what is the Romulan War about, your fan film?
And how did you get involved in fan films?
Well, I'll start with the second part of the question. I don't know if you've ever seen the Goldbergs TV series, but they're the lead actor there, the kid. He ran around with a video camera and was always making these short little films and always annoyed his friends and his family. Or they played along with him. That was kind of me. I was always tinkering with an 8mm film camera or a VHS camcorder. And so I was always interested in filming and shooting and editing, and that's just something I was fascinated with. And then, I went to college and focused on communications and specifically film and TV production. I did a lot of student projects that were sort of short films, and then there was commercials and all these other things that I was toying around with. And then I moved to Nashville and got work in the local TV industry here. So that's my training. I had kind of a filmmaking video production background. And so, yeah, I've always done that, and I made a couple short films. And then I guess the pivot happened when, I guess it would have been in the mid-90s, I found out that Paramount was accepting submissions for their script program. Like if you liked Star Trek and you wanted to write an episode or sell a story, you could send in a script to the production company at Paramount and they would look at it. It started during Next Generation. It continued all the way until the last season of Voyager. So I did that. I took a screenwriting class at the local art college here in Nashville, and I wrote a spec script for Deep Space Nine, and I sent it in, and that was the last I thought I'd ever hear of it. And sure enough, a couple months later, they called me from the studio and asked me if I wanted to come pitch more stories to Star Trek. And of course, at first I thought it was a prank by my friends, and it wasn't.
Okay, so really, that's great. I didn't know that. Did they actually called you in?
Yeah. It was the Deep Space Nine. This was Deep Space Nine producers. This would have been, I guess, season 4 or 5. I can't remember now. And so I flew out to LA, and, I had a buddy from college who lived in Burbank. He put me up on his couch. I went in to pitch. I went into walk past stage 31 and, all the bungalows on the Paramount lot, and went to the production office, and I did my first pitch to a producer named Hans Beimler. He had been with Star Trek since the Next Generation era. Star Trek wasn't his first gig. He'd been in television for a long time. So the first story I pitched to them, turns out they were already doing a story just like it. It was a Quark episode. And Hans had told me that had I been out there a couple months earlier, they would have bought the story off me. But I was a little too late. And they said, well, that's what he was like, you're on the right track. So when you have some more stuff, come on back. And that's what I did. I went back and I ended up pitching 3 more times to Trek, but it wasn't to Deep Space Nine. It was to Voyager. So I pitched to Voyager several times that way. And I think the last 2 were on the phone because I couldn't, they weren't going to pay for me to fly out there. So I did it on the phone. And then I almost sold a story to Voyager as well. And my last pitch to Voyager actually pitched to Brian Fuller. And I had gone out to the Brian Fuller pitch. I had gone out there one more time, and this was like his first job in television and film, as far as I know. And you guys know who Brian Fuller, he's the showrunner for Discovery, or he was the creator of Discovery, as well as, American Gods and Pushing Daisies and Hannibal. So he's a bigwig, but I remember him when he was, a junior writer, and I pitched to him, and I almost sold a story to them. They ran it up the food chain, and at the last minute, right, like literally it was the last day, the writing staff was, deciding what the season was going to look like, and they told me they were going to pass on it because mine was a comedy, and they, quote, had enough comedies for the season. So I missed that boat. Again, close but no cigar. And then, came back to Nashville, made some short films, and then I got married and took a new job and sat out on filmmaking for a long time, and just recently started getting back into it again. And so the Romulan War was an idea that I had come up with many years ago. It was probably shortly after Enterprise came on the air, and it is basically it's formatted as if you were watching a documentary. It tells us the different episodes of the war between Earth and the Romulan Empire. And as all savvy Star Trek fans know, the Romulan War is the catalyst for the creation of the Federation. We've not seen the Romulan War in an actual episode of any Star Trek series. And I really wanted to show this. And at the time when I came up with the idea and started working on it, there wasn't any. There was no either in regular Star Trek or in the fan community, there were no depictions of the Romulan War. There have been since then, but there weren't at the time. So there you go. I had a couple false starts. Primarily, the way the film is structured is it can't really work unless you have some really, a lot of special effects. I had a lot of false starts talking to people or communicating with people who said they could do the effects for something like this and then just couldn't. Either the quality wasn't there or they just flaked out and gave up. So that was the big struggle. And like the filming part of it was pretty easy to do. I mean, it's a documentary, so most of the filming consisted of finding a few actors, sitting them in a chair, lighting them, putting them in a costume, and then, quote, interviewing them. So that was not so hard to do. What was hard was lining up somebody that could do special effects consistently and with quality. And so that delayed the Romulan War easily for 5 or 6 years, just going through that. It was originally written as a feature. So it would have been like a 90-minute movie or a very long documentary. And then I changed the structure of it to be a web series. So I broke it down into like 16 parts, 16 chapters. Again, similar to The World at War, the World War II documentary that ran on the BBC. So it broke down into 16 pieces. And then the fan film guidelines came out, and you weren't allowed to make something that long. So the project's really been kind of retooled from the 16 chapters down to 2 15-minute chapters. And that's where we are now. But we filmed more. So we actually filmed with our actors as if it was a 16-chapter, 16-part story. So we have a lot of extra footage. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but we're moving right along. Most of the challenge at this point has been just waiting on the effects. You wouldn't believe, maybe you would believe, but these things take so much time. There's so many stages. I have no training. I mean, my training is in filming and production and post-production in the sense of like editing and stuff. I know absolutely nothing, or I didn't know anything about CGI or visual effects until I started this project. And it's very time intensive, especially if you don't have a lot of money and you're reliant on a small group of people who have other commitments, right? So there we are. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Do you have your special effects person now?
Yes. I guess almost 2 years ago, I connected with a gentleman named Samuel Cockings.
Great. We love him out of the UK.
Yes. The hardcore Trekkers know who Sam is. He is the commander on Trek Yards. And Trek Yards is a web series on YouTube that tracks and sort of goes in depth with all the different ships.
We're friends with Stuart Foley. We see him at conventions. I mean, they do a wonderful job, and everything that Samuel does is exceptional.
Absolutely. So he's doing our effects. Now, he's not the only one. He has a team put together. They're from all over the place. That's the thing is we have an effects team that's spread across Europe. We shot here in the States. And then we have also a second unit crew that shot some footage for us in Australia, believe it or not. One of the other fan filmmakers, Aaron Vanderklay, he's done, I think, 4 amazing Star Trek fan films. And he and I had been corresponding for a while. I'd asked if he'd shoot us some extra footage, stuff that we didn't really budget for originally, but which we needed footage to pad out the production, and he did, and it looks amazing, the stuff that him and his crew shot. So we'll probably be demoing some of that before too long.
So you do have some teasers out on your website, and they are fantastic. I mean, so you can tell that this is being made with high production values.
Well, I'm glad you like them. Yeah, the quality was, I think, really important. I think the thing that's cool is that Sam and I almost immediately agreed that the effects, the CGI, had to look like what the CGI looked like on Enterprise when it went off the air. There's several different styles you can use, like Battlestar Galactica, for example. Battlestar Galactica uses a style of computer animation that's hyper realistic. There's camera shakes and these snap zooms. It's almost like a documentary style, but with special effects like space footage.
It has a very unique feel when you're watching.
Yes. And I like all that, but that would not have fit with this production. What
we've seen so far of yours is that it does fit into the Enterprise timeline. It's a very fluid transition.
Yeah, that's what we were aiming for. I mean, we almost kind of feel like this would have been seasons 5 through 7 of Enterprise if the series hadn't been canceled, but told as a documentary and not necessarily following the Enterprise crew the whole time. That's what we do. We bounce around from ship to ship and planet to planet and battle to battle, and we document the different events. If you've ever seen The Civil War by Ken Burns, the documentary on PBS, not dissimilar from that.
But we appreciate that quality takes time. We look forward to this project, the Romulan War. Tell us, especially our listeners who are unfamiliar with your project, where can they find out more information about this up-and-coming independent Star Trek production?
I think the easiest thing is the portal for everything is at our website, www.theromulanwar.com. And from there, we have links to our Indiegogo page or our Facebook page or our YouTube page. We have a page for our audio dramas. But so, yeah, we have a bunch of different social media. But the easiest way for folks to remember if they're interested is to visit www.theromulanwar.com. Hopefully, if you visit our website, you're visiting it on a computer versus a phone. Because, I built the website myself and I am not a web designer, so it doesn't really translate well onto a phone. Then I'm going to go ahead and just beg for everybody's forgiveness and apologize in advance. So if you're going to go to the website, please do it on your computer. It will look the way it's supposed to that way. And just thank you. Thank you for everything you guys do, too, to push forward the community and the interest by fans. It's amazing.
Well, we appreciate it because that's what we are. We're a unique Trek community, and we love making contact with everyone else who loves Trek as well.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Sure thing, guys. Take care.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.